appreciate you being here. I'm Cheryl Bowden. I am one of the pro staffers here. I mostly fish the Lady Bass Anglers Association Women's Pro Tour. I've won the Classic 2 times. I actually leave a week from today to go to Grand Oklahoma, Grand Lake of the Cherokees for the championship.
Awesome.
So I'm excited about that. So ultimately, talking about the different levels of water column. You guys as kayakers, the benefit you have is you can get into a lot of shallow water. I can get in shallow water, but not like you can. But there's also the challenge for you that going from one place to the next. Because I'm going to find multiple places on the lake for the pattern, and you kind of have to go, okay, what's in here? So I would recommend you find creeks where there's water flowing in, especially with the rains. You know, y'all are going to be getting a little bit of rain from Helene and stuff, but anywhere where there's water flowing in the fall, you're going to find more bait. So I'm going to start with the top. So with the top, I would do something along the lines of a whopper plopper. Again, buzzbait's great, and I like a buzzbait. I actually have one. Did I pull one out here? I don't think I pulled one out, but a buzzbait would work. But I like to go smaller in the fall because depending on the bait. And if I can find the big gizzard shad, I don't mind doing the bigger. But sometimes that bigger plop 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 scares them away. They want something more subtle. Or you can go with something like a popping bait or a walking bait. Gotcha. Any of these would be possibilities. You know, the walking bait is larger, and because the walking bait is larger, I can cast it further, but also means I can get myself in more trouble. Because invariably, I'm going to get the bite on the end of the long cast. The downside or the positive to the popping bait, I can get them in different lengths, is the weight of my rod. Am I doing a spinning rod? Am I doing a bait caster? It doesn't matter. But starting with the top of the water, looking for the shad. Wherever I can find the shad, and I can see that whether I'm on a kayak or a bass boat or whatever. Sometimes the birds will help me out, but sometimes the birds are just there. And they're not necessarily after the bait fish, they're just in the area. But those will be the starting points. I'm going to start, hopefully I can find the most active fish chasing bait at the top. Always having something there. A follow-up that I would have to my top water is a bait like this. It could be a fluke, which is, I have a fluke here, a fluke style bait. This has to have a weight on it, but I want some kind of a follow-up that I can flip in there. Now, you said you're Arkansas, so is it a grass lake?
Not really.
Buffalo's
kind of
not.
open.
Okay, so if it's open, as long as there's not a lot, the open hook's not going to be bad.
Yeah.
And then you get better hookups.
Play rods.
There you go. But I like that as a follow-up bait or by itself. You know, if they've been schooling but they're not up, I'll come back with a bait like this, a swimming bait like this, a fluke, something that I can dart through the water, or I might even go through with a jerkbait. Now we've kind of moved off the top water, but these are always going to be supports because they may be busting at the top 1 minute and they're gone, but they're not gone. They're just down there. So I'm going to do something along the lines of this bait with my open hook, my spinner bait, and I like bait caster for those things. I even will throw my fluke on a bait caster, weightless, or a jerkbait. So believe it or not, a jerkbait's good all year long. I'm just going to move it a lot faster.
Yeah.
And you want one that sustains. So in the wintertime when you're fishing jerkbait, you can go to sleep. Jerk, jerk, and I'm sleeping before I twitch it again. But this time of the year, the bait fish are active. So I'm going to be actually moving it a lot faster. It's almost burning. Especially if I know that they've been active on the top. The other options are going to be a flat-sided crankbait. This happens to be the XPS version like of a rattle trap. I like the blue and chrome, but whatever matches the bait. Those are going to be the big things. And then, of course, you got a square bill. It's hard to beat a square bill. Because I can fish that in various different depths. If I am fishing in, say, 1 or 2 feet of water, I cast and I keep my rod tip up. And that's going to keep my bait up shallow. Because it's going to go anywhere from 3 to 5 feet. Well, if I've got a 7-foot rod and I've got my rod tip up, and I see about a crankbait, you got 6 points there that are going to hit. So it's not like I have to have a good hook set, I just have to have the pressure. Because they're going to hook themselves. And then, of course, I've got, for the shallow water, I've got the chatterbaits and spinnerbaits. Is it muddy water where you guys have been, or they're dingy?
Sometimes, yeah.
So
closer to the shore.
Let's define how deep you sink the bait.
Probably, like, if I'm fishing around the edge, yeah. Or on the kayak,
4 feet or so.
Yeah.
So for us, that's very clear.
Yeah.
But if it is dingier, what you might go to is having a willow in Colorado or willow in Indiana. Switch out one of the blades because it gets a little bit more wonk to it, but not a lot. But you still got the flash of the other blade. And you can change the blades out based upon the size of the bait fish. You want it to be similar, but not necessarily exactly the same. When I won the Classic on Old Hickory in Tennessee in 2012, it was almost by accident. Because usually in 3-day tournaments, you can't fish the same area over and over and over and over again. And this one pocket, East Station Camp, was just, there were bait fish, the water was black with bait fish. So I'm competing with millions of bait fish. And I'm casting into the deeper water over by the docks, and I look back, and I see a group of bait fish doing something different. So I reach over and I throw out my little square bill, and I catch the big bass for the tournament. Because I saw something different by chance running around. I couldn't catch any of the fish over there by then.
Yeah, I bet.
And then I was going in the back of Station Camp, and it's got little metal poles. Because water runs in, there's logs all over the place. But there's poles so that people who live there will know how to drive their boats in. And so I'm running around, and I'm in the lane, and here comes a pontoon, or I think it was a pontoon. So I start fishing around this one metal pole to get out of their way, and then I caught fish. And I thought, because I was just fishing from shallow to deep.
Yeah.
Well, when I started fishing all the way around those poles, I started catching 1 or 2 fish off of every pole.
That's crazy.
And there were like 4 poles. And so I began doing that, and that's how I ended up winning the tournament, because that was something I could repeat, and the fish were continuing to move in. Because all the bait fish that were up further in the creek, they were up, they weren't all the way in the back, and I was working my way back.
Yeah.
Another thing too is Alabama rig. Now for you guys in your kayaks, Alabama rig, it's great, but it's also really hard.
Yeah, it's too much.
Because you can still do that roll cast, but it's almost where you have to get your rod here and just block. But you're in such shallow water, are you going to be able to move through the water? So you might try a 3-blade versus a 5-blade. This one I think is a 5-blade, but they do make a 3-blade. Actually, I see 3 hooks, but I see 5 baits. I'm not sure which one this is.
I got a jumbo that I fish a bigger lake with. And I have one of those. I've never really used
You know,
it.
I've not fished it a lot. I suspect that next week and the week after on Grand, I suspect that's going to be something I'm going to at least try. Because I want to, you know, if they're all chasing bait and I throw out 4 or 5 little baits and I get it in there, you would think that I would at least, hopefully it won't be all little ones. And so, but that gives me a different depth in the water column too. I can fish it up high again by holding my rod up. I can drop my rod tip down, fish it a little deeper. I'm going to throw it on braid just because it's a lot of mass. You know, and I don't fish everything on braid. My whopper plopper, I tend to throw on braid. A lot of times if I chatterbait, I'll throw it on braid, or I'll throw braid with a short fluoro rig leader. I just don't want to yank it out of their mouth, because a lot of times with chatterbait and spinnerbait, I can yank it out of their mouth if I've got too much on it. But if I'm pulling through grass, not the case on Grand, but if you go up to Washita, you've got lots of grass. I don't know, does the gray has some patches of grass, and I don't think it has as much.
I don't think so.
But where's the Buffalo in relation to Little Rock?
It's north about 2 hours.
So you're up closer to the Missouri border.
Yeah,
So you're
pretty
more
close
along
to
the
the
Bull
White
Shoals.
River.
You're along the Bull Shoals. So Bull Shoals, you've got all the buckrush
Yeah.
and stuff. So, but other than that, that still would work. It's just, you know, you got to be careful of the buckrush.
Yeah.
And again, I've got all these options. I can fish a little swim bait with the weight, without a weight. I can put a Texas rig weight on the front of it if I want to, and use one of these little bobber stoppers and peg the weight down so that it's not sliding away from it, and I can still swim it. And I can change out whatever size weights that would allow me to fish at different depths, and of course different sizes. I typically do paddle down on mine versus paddle up.
What's the difference in terms of the depth, the angle a little bit?
It's going to change the depth a little bit. This, with it down, is going to actually, it's going to help it stay kind of neutral and sometimes a little up. If I put it on the other side, it's going to push it down a little bit.
Interesting.
It seems opposite, but that's the way that would be. I can also fish it with a belly weight if I need a little bit of mass. I prefer the belly weights that have the the screws on them, the hitchers, versus putting it through here, because then I have to retie this every single time. And I don't like doing that. So if I were doing this with the weight, I would go back and there's a package thing called hitchers, and you put it on the eyelet, run it down. The problem is because of the shape of this hook, that bend, that hitcher is not going to fit quite the way I want it to. If you find on your baits like this that the grass or whatever, or your fish keep pulling the top of the weight down and everything gets bunched up, there's a little trick that you can do. Put this on below your sinker, a little swivel. And so it's going to be on your line, and then put it over the hook and pull it up. Remember, it's going to be on your line up here.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And now it keeps your bait from getting pulled out. Now they make a thing called a parasite clip that does the same thing, but that's one more thing to buy.
Exactly.
And I typically always am going to have swivels, and I want to use a smaller swivel. But remember, this part's over the line.
Yeah.
Just run through it. It's not tight. It's just over it. And then once I put the bait over that part of it, I take this, and now I go through and I put my bait back on.
Are you tying onto the swivel or are you just tying onto the normal?
I'm just tying on normal. The
Yeah.
swivel is free on the line.
Gotcha.
It'll slide. And then I put my bait back on. And now that's on my line. And now it keeps my bait from being pulled out.
Yeah.
Whether that's a stick bait or other times of the
And
year,
it doesn't pull on the line at all.
it doesn't pull on the line.
Do you worry about it fraying the line at all, or?
It shouldn't. The weight's going to be more likely to fray it, and if it's up here between the weight and the line, it's actually going to help protect your knot a little bit. I mean, it's smooth, and if you think about a swivel, the barrel on it and everything is relatively smooth. And
How do you go about like color selection when thinking about like water clarity and like the clouds and sun and stuff like that?
you know, if it's bright sunshine, like the baits you guys have right there, if it's really bright, I'm probably going to go through and I'm going to select maybe a translucent or clear. Because they're going to be able to see the movement of and change of the water, but they're not going to be able to key on it and know that's the bait. I can also use black, which just gives a dark silhouette.
Yeah.
Another color that's popular this time of year is bone. I like that more on cloudy days. You know, the same thing. I can get away with this on both cloudy and sunny days, just because of the nature of the time of year it is. But beyond the top waters, I do worry about the color. I try to match the color of the shad, but it's also, we don't want to forget about the crawdads. You know, we've talked about the upper part of the field, now we've talked about the middle, but I also want to realize that I can, and this is not a color I would choose, just happens to be one that I was able to pull out, Texas rigger crawdad. If I were fishing this one, what I would probably do is I would probably cut it right here and make sure that the hook was right here on the end.
Yeah.
And then I would use a peg bobber stopper to keep the weight from moving. Right now I've got a knot in it because I don't want it running all over the place. I want to keep it relatively close, but if I wanted to, I could move the bobber stopper up like I've got this knot, or I've got a little bit of space. It's going to give a little bit more freedom with that bait.
Sure.
So the fish will kind of tell you a little bit about that. But I like these swimming style baits. I like the paddle baits. But even on the split tails, on my spinner bait here, I actually have a split tail. It kind of depends on what's going on, how much water I need to move. I play with it. I really like a white baby brush hog where I cut right above his little arms and put that on there, just the tentacles on the end. But then when I start moving to the bottom, I've got my Texas rig choices, but I really love the jig.
Me too.
You know,
the crossback jig.
Yeah, and I'll keep my cross short like I've got it on this one.
Yeah.
And so,
See that? You ever trim the skirts on it? Just
I do sometimes.
make a little smaller profile.
It depends on the size of the hook.
Yeah.
And I typically will use a 1/2 ounce. And I don't mind if it's a football jig or a swim jig. It does, I cut that crawl down. And so the crawl just barely covers the hook.
Yeah.
And then once you catch a fish or two that have craws in their gullet, you can see the craws. it'll tell you whether or not you need to dye the pincher. So bull shoals, they tend to be red. Logan Martin in Alabama, they tend to be orange. And so I've got different dip-in dyes that I'll just barely do the tip on. There was a lake, where were we at, that I had to use blue. Might have been Cabela, which is strange because it's right down the river.
Yeah, right next to Ozarks.
Ozarks and right down on Bull Shoals. And I used blue. So you just have to go through, actually Logan Martin one year was blue. So, you know, you have to get lucky enough to catch a fish that's got a crawl that you can still see the pictures. Or make sure I check my live well after each day of the tournament, because it's a 3-day tournament for the championship. It's 2-day, and sometimes in practice I'll catch fish and I'll put them in my live well to see if they're going to spit up cross.
Yeah.
Because they'll be in there and I can tell what colors and stuff. And that will be where I change up my skirt colors. You know, like this one is pretty much just green pumpkin.
Yeah.
But this one has the orange and yellow in it because of the bluegill. And if they happen to have blue in their pinchers, or they happen to have orange, I've got a little bit of touch of all that right there. So it kind of gives me a little bit of time. Then, of course, the next thing on the bottom, don't ever rule out a Carolina ring. Especially when you get that mud.
Yeah.
Whether it's a ribbon tail worm, or whether it's a craw, or whatever your favorite trailer is, any of those things would work. You know, I can tell you the things that work for me that I like, but everybody has their bait that works.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I like tungsten weights simply because there's a lot better feel. I also like fluorocarbon, but fluorocarbon's expensive, so I cheat. On every one of these bait casters with fluorocarbon, it's only about a third of the spool is fluorocarbon. The rest of it, and these are brand new spools where I will show you.
Yeah.
But what I will do on a bait caster is I will take and I'll put a half a spool of mono on it. Because it's only about $10 for 1,000, 1,500 yards. And then I'll take electrical tape and I'll totally cover that spool. And then I'll tie my fluoro on as if it's just a brand new spool. And if you think about the casting distance, obviously casting distance is a little different for you guys in kites than it is for me in boat. But when you think about how far to cast, look at the first pillar over there. Would you say that you can cast that far?
I mean,
Yeah, how good one. I think that's about it though.
Okay, so why do we want to put 175 yards of line on?
You only need 60.
Because you probably only need 60 to 80 yards of line. So if you look at the second pillar, what I typically do is I will walk off that amount of line with fluorocarbon and I'll spool it on top.
yeah.
Because even on a great day of casting, I can have a heavy, heavy bait to get it that far all the time. And then I'm out in open water. If I'm up close, I'm not even going to go that far. So when I think about those distances, why do I want to, you know, if I get the roll of this Bass Pro XPS fluorocarbon, which I love it, it's $90. And it gets me about 800 yards. Well, if I spool 100 yards on every rod, that only gets me 8 rods. I can get 12 to 15.
Yeah, gotcha.
So now I've made that $100 go a lot further. And people are like, well, just tie them together. Where does my backlash go every time if I get a battle? Right down to that knot. And then I've got to pull that out of the knot and everything else. And then, but if I use that electrical tape, and then I use my thumb and I tighten the drag and I heat it up, get it down there really tight where I can see the seams of the line. Now I tie my new line on. If I get a backlash, I'm only going to lose that much line. If I need to retie, I only have to retie that much. Because it saves me money.
Gotcha.
I mean, that's pretty much it. There's not a whole lot. I mean, fall fishing is junk fishing.
Yeah.
You know, there are all these options, but you ultimately have to figure out what do the fish want right now. And for my 3-day tournament, it's going to be different every single day. So I have to find multiple options because the reality is very seldom am I going to go to one area like I did in Station Camp. Very seldom you're going to go to one area and you're going to be able to hold on for 3 days in a tournament. It just doesn't happen. You know, when I won at Gunnersville in 16, I had an area, but I had 6 spots within a half a mile of one. So I was able to just rotate through them. And so my fish lasted for 3 days. even though the last day I only caught 4.
Yeah.
But I had such a lead that I knew that unless they caught giants, they would have to have a limit. And when I caught my 4th fish, I'm like, unless it's a super big limit, they're not going to overcome that 12 to 15 pound lead bag. And that was all topwater frog. So if you go to Washita, I would use a popping frog. I would use a swimming frog. I would use a buzzing frog. Any of those options. So.
What's your PR?
What now?
What's your biggest fish?
Personal best is about 8.5.
Yeah. And then you got to pick one hard plastic and one soft plastic for the rest of your life. What are you picking?
I'm going to do crankbait. Can a jig be part of my heart, my soft?
Yeah.
With the trailer?
Yeah.
It's either that or wacky.
Okay. That's what I was telling her earlier today.
It's wacky weightless I love. And I do almost weightless wacky. I don't do just weightless. I take and I do a circle hook with the guard on it. And VMC now has a new ring where you can hook it either like we normally do, or you can hook it with the thing.
Where it's like
Yes.
sideways like
yes.
this? Gotcha.
So I can hook it both ways. So I'm playing with that. I like it. I've got to get used to the different sizes they have. But I will take a 1/16 ounce tungsten weight with a bobber stopper on it and peg it right to the top of that. And it gives me just enough extra weight. It's still falling slow, but it's easier for me to cast, and I have a better feel even in the wind. And I came across that by accident. That's the wonderful things about accidental find. We were fishing Hickory, North Carolina, and it was so windy, I could not feel. But I'm like, when I could get it where I needed to, I could feel it. I was getting good bites on the whack. So I thought, try it. And I did, and I started getting more bites. And I could actually, I could control it even in the waves, and I could see my line when it began to move a lot easier because it was falling just fast enough that the waves weren't overtaking it. And so that has become my go-to instead of totally weightless. And now it's going to be playing with the VMC as to whether or not I'm going to hook it more like what they call it a Nico, is that what they call it when it hooked with
I think so.
so it's either going to be, traditional wacky or more of a Nico type. But I still use the same hook. And I like the VMC circle hook with the wire.
Yeah.
Some people don't like it. It has its ills, don't get me wrong. And I do lose fish. I'm not going to say I don't. I do lose fish on it. But I very seldom get hung up with the hook getting hung up on something because of that wire. And so,
I had a question. One thing is, like with kayaks and stuff, we love to troll.
right.
We love trolling like a rebel craw or something behind. Like say we're fishing like 5 feet, 3 to 5 feet of water, like not slow, but like not fast.
Right. A mile an hour, maybe half a mile an hour.
Like how deep are we trolling this line? Like 30 feet back? Like
it all depends upon the bait you're trolling and the weight that's on it. Is there any current? All of that is going to impact it. So one of the best ways to kind of figure that out is get a set amount of line that you want out and try different amounts of weight. And when you're trolling, when can you feel it bouncing?
Yeah.
Then you know it's too heavy, it's on the bottom. And then move up the size on the weight. And because the lighter the weight, the higher it's going to be in the water. But also the line size affects that. I keep looking for my crankbait that I was doing. My crankbait, if I put this crankbait, it's supposed to run, does it even say on this one? Typically, it says 1.2 meters. So we're talking 4 feet. So, but if I put this on 6-pound line, I can probably get that down to 5.
Yeah.
But if I put it on 20-pound, I'm lucky to get it down below a foot. So your line size makes a difference. But your line size is going to make a difference in how many bites you get. I tend to run line a lot lighter. I did put this one on this jig on 14. I love the older ones because they have got lines in it. They don't have it on the newer ones, but I like that. I had it on 10 when I went up a few weeks ago to check out Grand for the first time. And I was in this one little area casting it, and I missed a bite, and then I cast out there, and I go to set the hook, and my line is just going, and you can hear my reel going, whee! And it snapped it. And it was 10 pounds. I'm like, well, I know fish are rocks, it could have been bad, but I don't think I've ever had a reel spin like that. But I tend to do my drag light because I rely on my thumb pressure. That's how I produce it on my longer cast. It has its ills because of the backlashes, but it allows me to cast further, and it allows me to control. So if I have a fish run like that, typically it's enough that I can let it run, but I can break it.
Yeah.
That one took off so fast that either there was a bad spot in the line or it didn't matter, it was just gone. So I hope I can go back and find that one during the tournament and make sure that if it's a bass especially. With the top waters, again, I like for my ploppers and some of those to have popper ploppers. That's pretty much, and frogs. I like to have braid on them. But on my pop bars, walking the baits, it'll be mono. But I have seen, and I may try it, where a lot of people are putting on braid, and they're putting on about a 2-foot leader of fluoro. Because 1 to 2 feet of fluoro at that, for a walking bait, it's not going to sink because there's not enough of it.
Yeah.
And it still gives me that sensitivity. So it's something I'm thinking about trying. I saw that and I thought, I kind of like that, because a lot of times on the top water, mono stretches so bad, you miss the bite. But then when you think about how many hooks are on that big walking bait, I can yank them out because they're just slapping. So again, it's just figuring out what do they want, and what's the most success on. I do really, really, really like the splashy swimmer. Just because as it's going through the water, that thing is spinning. And then of course there's always, they like the little darting baits. I can pop this and then take your flukes, one without weights on the hook, and you can donkey rig it where you've got one and then you put a swivel that's got a Y swivel and two of these, and you can jerk it. So when you jerk it, they're both going different directions. And you don't get the line twist because you've got that triangle swivel. I don't know really what it's called, but it's basically, it's got one swivel and it's got a branch off of it for a swivel for each one of them. Now, if you find on your chatterbait or these that they are short striking it, you can take and not put a normal stinger on it, but you can take a treble hook, run it over the hook. I can't see the thing. I can take a treble hook and run a treble hook under here, and then take one prong and stick it up here. Now I've got those two in the back that are down, and I've got a stinger back there that is not floating around. So if I pull it through the crap, I'm going to get hung up. But if I'm just going through the water column, it allows me that if I feel like they're just grabbing here, then they've got two hooks hanging down versus the one that's wobbling. And it gives me that option. A buddy of mine shared that with me once. It was like, oh, you can even do it with these. Actually, what I've done it with is this, and it works. Because a lot of times with just a minnow bait like this, they'll come up and they'll grab the tail.
Yeah.
Or they'll grab here. Well, they don't quite get that. But if you've got two hooks hanging down,
especially with the craw too, they bite the things off all the time.
Yeah. I've never tried it with the craw. I haven't thought about that. I guess if I'm swimming it with my Texas rig, I could do that. But if I'm Texas rigging it, it's just going to get caught. Because like you got an anchor down there to grab it.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything else.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Well, good luck to y'all.
Good luck to you.
What brings y'all here?
We're all going to University of Arkansas. We're here for the football game. They're playing A&M in Arlington.
Okay. Oh, yeah, TNT Stadium.
Yeah.
There's so much to do around the stadium. It's just, but traffic is not fun. Well, good luck to you. Thanks for coming by. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
And